Hello everyone, this week we are going to talk about creating an environment for growth and prosperity. So let's first look at the historical perspective on the economic growth of the past 2 centuries. You see a graph on the screen. This is the per capita income and that represents the last 1000 years. As you see in this graph, income stagnated for the 800 years following year 1000, but then growth has exploded during the last 200 years. And these dollars measured in 2011 dollars. World per capita income, which is the green line, was 1,122 in 1820, which is only about 50% higher than year 1000. By 2010, however, the world income had risen to $13,070, more than 10 times the 1820 level. And the red one represents the high-income industrial countries. And during the past 2 years, the income growth of the West has been even higher, nearly 20-fold. Life expectancy is a similar pattern, that of per capita income. Life expectancy at birth for the world, which is the green line, rose from 24 to 26 years between 1000 and 1820, but it soared to 70 by 2010. And when you look at the industrial countries, that you can see the similar pattern also. Next, let's talk about economic growth, production possibilities, and the quality of life. Economic growth is important because it's a necessary ingredient for higher incomes and higher living standards. GDP is a measure of output and income. Growth of output is necessary for the growth of income. Per capita GDP is the nation's GDP divided by its population. Growth of per capita GDP means more goods and services per person. In most cases, higher GDP per capita means that the typical person has a better diet, improved health and access to medical services, a longer life expectancy and greater educational opportunity. Growth leads to more than just material goods. It also generally leads a cleaner environment and more time for leisure and recreation. Here on the screen you see a production possibility curve. Economic growth makes larger outputs possible. When the production possibility curve shifts outward, you can consume both more consumption goods and more capital goods. Capital goods are used for investment, and that means future economic growth. Consumption goods that you are consuming now. Economic growth means that a larger quantity of goods and services can be produced. Now let's talk about Rule of 70. So Rule of 70 says that by dividing 70 by a country's average growth rate gives the number of years required for an economy's income level to double. For example, if the US had a growth rate of 2.5%, US needs 28 years to double its income. How do we find? Divide 70 by 2.5 and that's 28. So if the average income level is now $60,000, it takes 28 years, it will double, which will be $120,000. We can see the impact of economic growth rate differences over a 30-year period. So on the screen, you have several different growth rates, which are the average growth rates. And with that growth rates, we will find out what is going to be the per capita income level after 30 years. So we have 0%, 1%, 2%, and 4%, and the starting income is $10,000 per person. So if there is no growth, then you will have $10,000 after 30 years. If there is 1%, then the total income per capita increases by 34%. And 2% growth, it's almost 82%. And for 4% growth, as you see, the income triples. Next, let's talk about sources of economic growth and high-income countries. We have 3 sources of economic growth. The first one is gains from trade. The second one is entrepreneurial discovery. The third one is investment in physical and human capital. The first one is gains from trade. Trade makes larger outputs possible because of division of labor, specialization in areas of comparative advantage, and application of mass production techniques. The gains from trade will be greater when transaction costs are lower and people are permitted to trade over a larger market area. Entrepreneurial discovery is the discovery of improved products and lower cost production methods, which is the driving force of economic growth. And technological improvement is the scientific discovery, while innovation is its practical application and dissemination. Each of these play a role in development of improved products and better ways of doing things. And also I want to emphasize here Schumpeter's theory of creative destruction. So when a new technology becomes available, all technologies become obsolete. So for example, you can think about that we have cassette players first, and then after that CDs, and then we have the digital music. It's vitally important that entrepreneurs have a chance to try out new ideas, but it's also important that resources are not wasted on inefficient projects. But in a market economy, especially free market economy, with a competitive force, profits and losses perform this function. Next one is investment in physical and human capital. More and better machines and tools can enhance the productivity of people. Education and training that improves the skill level of workers will also increase output. Other things constant, countries that invest more will tend to grow more rapidly. But investment is costly. It involves the sacrifice of current consumption. High investment rates do not guarantee rapid growth. The investment must be channeled into wealth-creating projects. Next, let's talk about institutional environment. Modern growth analysis stresses that institutions and policies influence the realization of gains from trade, discovery and dissemination of improved products and production methods, and the level and productivity of investment. Modern analysis builds on the work of Nobel laureate Douglas North and Peter Bauer. Other leading contributors are Daron Acemoglu, Robert Barro, and Barry Weingast. Economic growth is a complex process that generally involves a combination of several interrelated factors. Counterproductive policies in one or two key areas can substantially harm the overall performance of an economy. So, next question that we need to answer: what institutions and policies will promote growth? Institutional elements that are key to growth process: first, a legal system that protects property rights and enforces contracts even-handedly. Second, competitive markets. Third, access to money of stable value. Fourth, minimal regulation. Fifth, avoidance of high marginal tax rates. And sixth is trade openness. Modern growth analysis stresses the importance of institutions and policies. And now we are going to go over each of these factors separately. First, legal system. A legal system that protects property rights and enforces contracts even-handedly is necessary for the smooth operation of markets. So the key point here is that private ownership. Private ownership provides people with a strong incentive to develop and use resources wisely, innovate, discover better ways of doing things, and to invest and conserve for the future. Just think about that. If the government confiscates the property from you when your business becomes profitable, you do not have incentive to innovate or find better ways of doing the things. In contrast, insecure property rights weaken the incentive to invest and to engage in entrepreneurial activity. If contracts are not enforced, or if they are enforced in a biased manner, transaction costs will be higher, trade will be riskier, and the volume of trade will fall. The security of property rights is often undermined by political instability, civil unrest, and war. And we see several examples in the history, even still today, and a couple of them are Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe, Haiti, Nicaragua, Russia, and Iraq. The second one is competitive markets. When markets are competitive, self-interested individuals have strong incentive to develop resources and provide goods that are highly valued by others. In a competitive setting, producers must provide goods at a low cost and serve the interest of consumers, because if they don't, other suppliers will. The freedom to compete will encourage entrepreneurial activity and provide producers with a strong incentive to produce quality products at a low cost. And the next one is monetary and price stability. When the inflation rate is low and highly predictable, the risk of exchange across time periods is reduced. In contrast, high and variable rates of inflation generate uncertainty, thereby increase the cost of exchange across time periods and reduce investment. Thus, the gains from trade, entrepreneurial discovery, and investment are diminished. The next one is the minimal regulation. Regulation is a blunt instrument and it often generates harmful secondary effects. Regulations that restrict entry and interfere with voluntary exchange will reduce the competitiveness of markets and the volume of trade. Regulations that favor some at the expense of others will encourage rent-seeking and political corruption. The next one is avoid high marginal tax rates. High marginal tax rates reduce the incentive of people to earn, invest, and engage in other productive activities. High taxes also reduce efficiency by driving productive activity into the underground economy, encouraging tax avoidance, and even inducing highly productive persons to move to other countries. And the final one is trade openness. Like domestic trade, international trade is mutually advantageous. With trade, countries can specialize in the production of goods they can produce economically and trade for those that would be costly to produce domestically. As a result, joint output can be expanded and both trading partners can consume a larger, more diverse bundle of goods. On the other hand, tariffs, quotas, and other trade restrictions reduce the gains from specialization and international trade and thereby reduce income below its potential. So, as a summary, what can governments do to promote prosperity? Governments promote economic progress when they protect individuals and their property, enforce contracts impartially, provide access to money of stable value, avoid high taxes and excessive regulation, and foster competitive markets and free international trade. How about other factors that may influence growth and income? Let's check other views on growth. Through the years, economists have developed several theories about why some countries grow and others stagnate. While some are valid, history has shown others to either be fallacious or incomplete. So we will consider some of the alternative views here. In 1798, economist Thomas Malthus argued that if income rose above subsistence level, this would trigger a population boom that would drive income back down to subsistence level. So according to him, population grows exponentially, 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16, while the resources expand, production would grow only linearly, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Therefore, any increase in income above subsistence would soon be eliminated by rapid population growth. Malthus was wrong because he did not understand the importance of technological improvements, innovation, and entrepreneurial discovery. We are not actually producing linearly now. Because of the technology and the discovery, our production grows maybe more than threefold, fourfold. The next one is the nature resources and growth. There is a tendency to think that income differences across countries are largely the result of natural resources. While resources may give a country an advantage, the linkage between resources and income is weak. Many high-income countries have few natural resources like Japan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Many resource-rich countries are poor, Nigeria, Venezuela, Indonesia, and Russia. So there is resource curse. This is the view that abundant resources are often lead to the adoption of counterproductive policies. This would weaken the link between the abundance of natural resources and income levels. And the next theory is foreign aid and growth. In the 50s and 60s, it was widely believed aid from high-income countries would help poor countries invest in infrastructure such as roads and power-generating facilities, and that this would provide the startup capital needed to trigger the growth process. While the theory sounded good, studies indicate that the aid was largely ineffective. The aid was often used to prop up corrupt authoritarian regimes and thereby retard needed institutional change. Further, aid in the form of surplus agricultural products often disrupted markets in less developed countries. Unless growth-oriented policies are adopted, foreign aid will continue to be ineffective. And the next one is climate, location, and growth. Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University argues that tropical countries are disadvantaged because their hot, humid climates erode the energy level of workers and increase the risk of disabling and life-threatening disease, and their location is far from the major markets of Western Europe, North America, and Japan. While income levels of tropical countries are generally lower than incomes in more temperate climates, their institutions and policies are also less consistent with the realization of gains from trade, entrepreneurship, and investment. The record of Singapore and Hong Kong shows that tropical countries with sound institutions can achieve impressive growth and income. And next, let's talk about poverty, foreign aid, and quality of institutions in Africa. More foreign aid has been directed at Africa than any other region in the world, but the results have been disappointing. The poverty rate in Africa has declined slower than in other regions of the world. The institutional environment in Africa is inconsistent with economic growth. So Africa is characterized by trade restrictions, a poor legal environment, and extensive regulation of business. Most sub-Saharan countries rank in the bottom quarter of economic freedom of the World Index. You see two graphs here. In sub-Saharan Africa, the extreme poverty rate, which is the per person income of $1.90 per day, fell from 69% in 1980 to 40% in 2030. In the rest of the world, the extreme poverty rate fell from 57% to 11% during the same period. The moderate poverty rate, which is the income per person of $3.10 per day, also declined far less rapidly in sub-Saharan Africa than in the rest of the world. And let's talk about institutions, policies, and prosperity. Institutions and policies matter because they shape incentives and thereby influence whether individuals engage in productive, unproductive, or even counterproductive activities. When institutions and policies provide secure property rights, a fair and balanced judicial system, monetary stability, and effective limits on government's ability to transfer wealth through taxation and regulation, individuals are encouraged to engage in productive activities. When the legal and regulatory environment fails to protect property rights and often favors some at the expense of others, individuals are instead encouraged to engage in rent-seeking, lobbying, bribes, and other counterproductive activities. Unless countries adopt institutions and policies supportive of trade, entrepreneurial discovery, and private investment, they will be unable to sustain long-term growth and achieve high income levels.